We're going to talk today about the real estate business, the lending business, how we got punched in the face, survived it, what we've learned over the last 20 plus years in this industry. Jason, it's good to have you here. And we just finished up an episode of That's Awkward, which was fantastic. But, during that episode, some things came up. So I want to do a little Q&A with you. And let's dive deep a little bit more. One of the things that I just learned about you was you got into this business in 2004. Mm-hmm. Now, for people that are newer in the industry or people that have been around, one of two things. In 2004, we basically hit a brick wall about 6 to 8 months right after that.
Yeah,
it was like mid 2004.
Yeah, writing was on the wall. Like 05 to 06 was when everything started coming in.
Correct. Mm-hmm. So what I like to say is, you had mentioned it as well in your pod or in our last episode. You had mentioned that being in Orange County, if you don't have a real estate license, you more than likely have a mortgage license. In other words, there's a lot of people in our industry. Yeah. And
especially when times are good.
Exactly. And it can be very lucrative. But people don't realize and people don't understand that this business is really about surviving in those times of the 2004s, 2005s, and what I like to call you got punched in the nose. Yeah. Big time. And what was that like for you coming brand new into the industry, and whether or not you had success early on or not? I know that there had to be very little, if any, success in 05, 06. Yeah. So what was that like coming into the industry and having faith that I'm going to hang out in this thing and I'm going to try to make something of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I can answer that. One quick segue, you mentioned about 08. If I had $1 for every time I heard somebody say, hey, I used to be a loan officer too, I'd always ask, when was that? Yep. And they say, oh, it's before 08, right? Mm-hmm. So that's right. You either are a career professional or you're not. Right. So just pointing that out. It's funny. I hear that a lot. I'm sure you do on the real estate side too.
Absolutely.
As far as your question, what was it like? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was hard.
Okay. So I was in the industry as well, and I remember it. I remember, holy cow. The writing was on the wall. Yeah. We all sat there in denial. I was fortunate that shortly after that I ended up picking up an REO account. And
good for you.
Yeah.
That was the sign of an incredibly intelligent realtor, by the way, when they went that direction. Mm-hmm. They saw where the writing on the wall was going.
Right.
So good on you about that.
Well, I got lucky. I fell into it. Turned out that I was coaching one of the kids in an all-star game, and his father was part of an asset management company for one of the banks. Yeah. And his son went off on the umpire. Yeah. Slid into third base, popped up, and the umpire called him out, and never saw so much attitude from a young man. Oh my gosh. I put my arm around him, sat him down, we walked back to the dugout, we came back in the next inning. And we had a new conversation with the umpire about, how he learned to be a little bit more humble, and he actually ended up apologizing. And it was a great learning experience for him.
Also good leadership from you. So that probably is why Dad.
What was interesting was Dad the next day. I didn't know Dad, and I didn't know, because this was all-star. So these weren't kids that I was working with all year long. So I got a call that Monday from somebody at the bank saying, go to this property and offer cash for keys. I'm faxing everything over. And I'm like, who are you and is this legit? And then the dad called me later on that afternoon and said, hey, did the bank get in touch with you? And it was one of those things that a relationship, you're 100% right, was developed because of how we showed up.
Is that
something
incredible?
Else. It was. Yeah. Otherwise, not to say that I wouldn't have made it through those tough times, but that was a pivotal moment in making difficult times a whole lot easier for me.
Yeah, it's it's the karmic effect, right?
Right.
It's the compound interest of honorable choices.
Right.
But back to 2004, I had got in, as a baby, 19, 20 years old. Okay. Right as things were waning, right? So for me, it was just, ignorance is bliss. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what was coming. I had no idea. All I knew is I needed to figure out how to pay my rent, and I learned in the model that existed at that time, which was a subprime era model.
Okay.
I had to unlearn all of that stuff because it wasn't the way to do business.
Right.
And that's when I found the mentors. I don't know if that's addressing your question, though.
Well, so let's talk about, because our audience are real estate agents and lenders, and a lot of the questions are, how do we survive in this industry, and how do we get better?
Yeah.
And
let's talk about that. I can talk about that.
Because right now, it's definitely not a 2005, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a very interesting market right now for both the lending industry and the real estate industry. And a lot of people are getting punched in the face right now, big time.
So the cure is working 2 to 3 times as hard, but also accepting that you're going to make less than half the money. And no one likes that answer, right? Because it's not sexy, and it's not like, hey, let's...
Right? Did you guys hear that? I've got to work harder, and I'm going to make less.
Yeah.
So you got a man here speaking the truth, and some of this conversation may hurt some people's feelings. Some of this conversation, our audience may come back and say, "Well, no, that's not the case. I'm still having success or great success." And there are some of those.
There are outliers, and I think that's inspiring.
Yes.
And a lot of times that's because they've been doing something right for many years leading up to that. Right?
That is the part that I think a lot of people miss, is that is happening because of so much good and so much hard work that was happening in the past.
Yeah, I think the people that are struggling right now are the folks that were doing well enough, times were good, but they can no longer get away with doing the same things and expect the different result, right?
Exactly.
That's the definition of insanity.
Insanity, exactly.
So this is where the rubber meets the road in someone's life and career, right? Because this is that point where they have to decide, am I staying in this industry or not? And if they're staying in this industry, it's going to require a change in them, right? I've met, even in this marketplace right now, new realtors that are absolutely killing it. And when I ask them, what is it that you're doing differently? And their answer, I don't take a day off. Yep. And I know that we all like work-life balance and all these other things where, we don't want to just make work our only identity. But in life and in one's entire career, there's got to be periods of unbalance.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, and see, I say almost the same thing. I say it a little bit differently, because we talk about balance and having a balanced life.
Yeah.
A lot of people define a balanced life as, well, I'm working this many hours per day, and I'm making sure I'm getting my workouts in, and I've got my free time for my family and this and that.
Yeah.
We can do anything we want in this world. We just can't do it all at the same time.
Right.
And I think people forget that
it's a season.
Exactly.
Right. It's a season where, it's like a New Year's resolution when you're trying to drop 20 pounds. You know that you have to push hard for 3 to 6 months, and it's not forever. Right. And that's all this industry is going through right now. And by the way, we've come a long way. It's been 2 years.
Exactly.
And look, maybe some people don't want to hear this, but it may not be a whole lot better until spring of 25. And it's like nails on the chalkboard. But
I was about to say, I think it's going to get worse.
And it very well could, right?
I think it's going to get worse.
So it's not about hope in the sense of we want things to turn around. It's what we have control over, because we don't have control over things that macroeconomically happen.
Exactly.
What is the CPI or PC inflation index going to say this month? What is the jobs report going to say this month? What's the Fed going to say this month? We don't have control over that. What we have control over is, are you sitting at open houses every single day that you possibly can?
Yep.
How's your follow-up in your CRM? How's your door knocking? How's your social media presence? Are you in a BNI chapter, right? Yep. What kind of networking are you doing? And that's got to be this thing that, well, at the end of the day, you should wake up in the morning and look at your calendar and go, ugh, okay, it's full.
Exactly.
And if it's not full and you find yourself behind a computer screen with paralysis by analysis of what am I going to do, or getting ready to get ready without actually taking action, whether it's a loan officer or a realtor, and what's nice about taking action, there's this inertia aspect of warming up in a workout. Your heart rate's not up enough, your sweat's not going, you don't feel good, and the workout for me, the warm up is the worst part, right? But there's that moment that you hit, the warm up phase, and the endorphins kick in, and you just feel like you're on cloud nine. You get to the end of a workout, you're like, oh, I crushed it, and I can crush the day. Well,
and as we get older, it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah, and that's okay. But the same can be said for our industry.
That's
right?
true. That's true.
Like getting used to a new cadence of life in terms of prospecting and networking and all that stuff. That first month, 2 or 3 is not going to feel great.
Right.
But when you do get to the point where you've adapted and now this is the new normal and your calendar is full and you don't wake up in the morning feeling, ugh, you're like, okay, let's go. Right. Eventually, the compound interest effect of all these activities may not manifest tomorrow, may not manifest next month or 6 months from now. And that's the hard part. That's where people fail because they're like, oh, I've been doing this for 3 months or 6 months. So why hasn't it worked? Oh, I'll give up. Talk to me if it doesn't work in year 2, right? Year 3.
One of the other interesting things that you brought up, and I was having this conversation with a couple of agents the other day, is they forgot, and both of these people that were having this conversation with me had a fabulous 2022 and had a horrible 2023. Yeah. And interestingly enough, 2024 is starting off to be very good for both of them. Oh. But here's what was interesting was they both had an epiphany. They forgot how to be busy.
Yeah.
Because 2023, they got used to that and they got comfortable. Now all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, I'm functioning at a different level now. And it took a little while for them to
recalibrate.
Exactly. Yeah. But once you recalibrate, that becomes a new norm. Yeah. And people forget that part. That
it's a subconscious thing.
Exactly.
We're habitual creatures, and sometimes it's unconscious where we it's like a frog in slowly boiling water. Right.
Yes.
Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And all I'm saying is motivation, fine, use it when it shows up. It rarely shows up for me.
Right.
It takes a step of faith. And what do they say? How long does it take to build a habit? Right. For me, it's more like 2 months.
Yeah. People say 30-something days.
Yeah.
I really think it's realistically somewhere between 90 and 120 days.
Yes. 100 days, let's call it. Let's call it 100 days. And what do we need? We need help and accountability. So like for me, the reason I'm passionate about this type of conversation, being a branch manager, is I know what it was like when I was younger to be suffering, to be lost, to be confused, right? So for me, I love coaching. I love mentoring because I don't necessarily enjoy looking at first-time homebuyers' tax returns and deciding if they qualify or not. I'm good at that, but it's not something that like changes my life, right? What changes my life is when I can take the next 20-year-old who's getting married, having kids, and feeling like, I got my license. What do I do now? Right? And if I can take what took me about 2 decades to kind of realize, if I can take that 2-decade time frame and condense it down for them in 3 to 5 years, that's life changing, right? And that's why I enjoy the coaching and the leadership and the branch management stuff more than I do the actual originations these days.
So you mentioned the word. I'm going to go back to a word that you said, accountability.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? Because that's a conversation I often have with people. Is who is in that accountability group with you? Who is who are the people you're surrounded? We've all heard it before. You are the
who you hang around.
Yes.
You are what you eat, and you are who you hang around.
Find the 5 people you hang around with the most, and I can figure out who you are really quickly. But what does accountability look like for you when you're having that conversation with people and you're saying, hey, you got to find the people out there. I know you had a mentor early on, likewise mentor early on. Yeah. And, still very much a part of my life. 30 years later, from when I got into this industry, he is still there and he's still very much a part of my life. And, his accountability now shows up a whole lot different than it showed up then, but it's still there. And I think people overlook that too often. But for you, give me an idea of what you look at it, how you look at it.
It's really, really simple. Now, for me, right now, at my stage of my career, the buck stops with me.
Okay.
I'm the leader. So I've had to figure out, left to my own devices, how to be make good choices. And that just comes with age and maturity and, building up these habits over years.
Right.
Somebody who's struggling and not quite there yet, I'm telling you, you mentioned your mentor, my mentor. So you have to surround yourself with people who are doing it at a high level. That's it. Right. And when you go to an office every day where somebody who's 10 or 20 years ahead of you in their career and you see them showing up powerfully and you're looking at them and you're like, how do they even do this? Right. That the more you every single day show up and shadow that person, watch what they do, watch how they do it, it's going to be hard for you to sit in complacency and laziness. First of all, your mentor is going to say, what are you doing? Right?
Exactly.
Get to work.
In a nice way.
There's no excuse at that point
right.
because, sure, if you go hang out with your buddies or, you're partying on the weekend and you choose to hang around a certain network that allows for that type of thing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with enjoying life. But if you do have a goal to get your career to a certain level, certain things have to take a back seat and other things have to take the front seat. And that's mentorship at the end. You got to find a good mentor. Like, go work for a team that's solid. Go find a mentor that's solid.
And that's a point that I'm hoping everybody is catching on. If you want to.
Yeah.
I think that's the first question is, hey, if you want to do this, this is what it's going to take. And too often we get that pretend, oh yeah, that's what I want.
Oh, it's easy to
say.
So what's that saying? The road to hell was paved by good intentions, right? Like if I had $1, like I said earlier about 08, but for loan officers, if I had $1 for every time I heard, yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. And
then when it came down to it, the action just wasn't there.
Correct.
Right? So you have to really take a step back and decide that. Now, what I've found is if you're taking on responsibility as a woman or a man, and that means maybe getting married, buying a house, or being responsible for a lease, having a desire to start a family,
right?
There's certain layers of responsibility that start to stack up in your life where you really don't have a choice, right?
You have a choice.
You have a choice, but the pressure is always going to be hanging over your head.
Correct.
Because if you haven't taken those steps in that life trajectory and you're just kind of chilling and hanging out with buddies and all that other stuff and going to concerts, and while I think that's great, maybe you're just not ready yet.
Correct.
Right. And you'll know when you're ready.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I think there's more wrong with.
You just have to be honest with yourself.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I either want the next 5 years to be traveling, exploring life, having a YouTube channel that talks about travel. I think that's freaking awesome.
Right.
And that might turn into something way more cool than anything a realtor or a loan officer could do.
Exactly.
Right? Who knows? But if you want this, you have to be honest with yourself and not have one foot on each side of the fence.
Exactly.
That's all.
And well, we see it all the time. I mean, one of my favorites that I see in our industry too often is there's nothing that, and I'm sorry because some of our audience is this, there's nothing that is more difficult for me to work with when I get an offer, I'm on the listing side and I get an offer from the buyer's agent and the pre-qual letter is from the same guy because he's the lender. He's the, I'm the lender.
Yeah, I have an opinion on this.
Yeah, they never go well.
Yeah, well, it's
that
called
transaction never goes well.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's called a jack of all trades and a master of none.
None, exactly.
Right. If you went to a surgeon for life-saving surgery that also happened to have 10 side businesses, right, you'd be like, this is strange because they're distracted and they're spread too thin.
Exactly.
And you can't be, look, Kobe Bryant, was he great at a bunch of other sports?
Nope.
He was great at one thing.
Correct.
Well, how did it go for Michael Jordan when he tried baseball? Right. So
he was adequate. But that's still, even when you look at somebody like that, you look at a Bo Jackson or somebody like that in those fields.
Yeah.
They were not superstars in both.
Yeah.
They were Michael Jordan was a superstar in basketball. Yeah. He was, let's be realistic. If he wasn't a superstar in basketball, would he ever was a talent good enough to actually ever get into baseball? Right. And that's the part that we miss.
Who won the fight, Mayweather versus McGregor?
No.
The Mayweather won the fight because it was a boxing match. That's just how this works.
Right.
Mayweather's the boxer, McGregor's the MMA guy.
Right.
I don't know. So it just, if there's any focus or like insight to what we're talking about today, patience. Right? Everyone's wanting this tomorrow.
Yes, they do.
And sorry, but if you're struggling in your career, it's probably going to take a year, 2 or 3 to turn it around. And that only is assuming that the next thing comes. Consistent action.
Consistency.
Right.
So, patience, consistency.
Yeah. So. And there's just a compound effect that's not sexy, that takes a long time to manifest. And when people say, oh, he's an overnight success, as usual, it's always 20 years of lead up that nobody got to witness.
Well, 10,000 hours of expertise that comes in.
Yeah.
And I'm really actually having a really good time having this conversation with you, because here is what I really enjoy when we have people that have been in this industry for a while.
Yeah.
There's a lot of commonalities that are occurring.
Yeah.
If you go back and absolutely patience, consistency, doing all the right things, struggling, having that accountability. We're not saying this because we happen to be the only two people that actually truly understand this. We are saying this because we've experienced it.
Yeah.
And we know it works.
Yeah.
And, that leads me to the next thing of, you got to have faith that the system actually works. You put that program in place, you work it, and you've got to have the faith that sooner or later it's going to come around and it's going to yield the results that you're looking for.
Yeah, you're touching on something that I think is important to talk about. Doing the right things is what you said. Mm-hmm. Now, that there is an aspect to this where you could spend the next 3 years doing the wrong things and not get anywhere.
That's true.
Right? Yep. So hard work, like work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
In my industry, at least with loan officers, I see really the major problem outside of complacency is the things that they are spending time on aren't dollar productive activities, right? And that could be, well, I've spent the last 3 months creating my business plan. Mm-hmm. Well, at some point you have to do something, right?
It's a plan.
I've watched all these YouTube video guys, and I think I know what I want to do. Well, at some point you have to do something. Or if somebody's a younger loan officer or a younger realtor, now there's anomalies and there's outliers. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but for the average human being, if you're a newer in the industry and you're going down to Newport Coast and prospecting bougie upper echelon agents and buyers and sellers, and you can't even grow a beard yet, let alone have any gray hair or receding hairline or whatever, right?
You better have a really good plan.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. So, what are you spending? What's your So here's the question to ask yourself: what's your ideal avatar client? Who do you align with? So, for me, I realized who I aligned with at a certain point, and I won't mention who, but at the same time, I was barking up the wrong tree a lot of times.
Right.
And so as hard as I wanted it, as bad as I wanted it, if the prospect wasn't my ideal avatar client that I naturally aligned with, think of it as the first day of school. You're at the first day of school, you're nervous, some people you're just like, they hate you and that you don't know why.
Exactly.
Right? Other people, you click immediately.
Exactly.
And it's like, whoa, how'd that work? Well, pay attention to that in business, right? Stop forcing things if it's not there. And if it's aligning naturally, for whatever reason, Nestor and I have always just hit it off.
Right.
It's been a very natural, easy relationship. And that works, and you go with that.
Exactly.
So last analogy, you're in a canoe or whatever you call it with your paddles, and you're rowing. The question is, are you rowing upstream or are you letting the current take you?
Yep.
Right? And that is a big analogy for life, and in business especially. Stop rowing upstream. Let the current take you and just enjoy the ride.
Correct. And I take that so often. The analogy I like to use that's similar to that is, as far as going with the current, is our kids. They grow up, they come home with that report card, and as parents, we focus on that C- or that D, and hey, we got to get that up.
Or maybe they're just not good at it.
Exactly. Maybe they're just not good at that. Let's take the B or the B plus and let's figure out how to make that an A.
Yeah.
And let's focus on that and what we're good at.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in our industry too often.
That's such a great point.
Yeah. We spend way too much time of how can I get better at this thing that I suck at?
Yeah.
No. Get better at the thing that take good and make that great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't take I'm crappy at this and try to make it
double
good.
down on what you're crappy at.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
it becomes effortless when you just go with the flow on that.
Right.
Yeah. Tony Robbins was a terrible student, and his teacher always told him he would never amount to anything because he talked too much.
Yeah.
How'd that work out for him?
Worked out really well because he figured out how to get people to pay him for talking.
Yeah, and we know ourselves. Now, when we're younger in our career and maybe still in our 30s or late 20s, it's hard to know yourself that well, and that's where the personal work has to come in, right? I'm not ashamed to say I see a therapist, right? I've experienced trauma in my life. I've experienced addiction in my life, and I've overcome those things, but that whole road to get to the other side has taught me who I am.
Exactly.
Right. So if you don't yet know fully, deeply to the core of your soul who you are, so here's the wake-up call. We talked about mentorship, but you also have to invest in personal work.
Yep.
Yeah, and drink the Kool-Aid, wave the pom-poms, the hoorah-rah stuff does come along with that sometimes because you're going to seminars, you're reading books, you're doing therapy, and it may feel a little bit weird, but those things are critically important. If our days, our downtime is filled with going to the bar with our buddies, watching Netflix, scrolling through Instagram walls, brain candy is what I call that.
Yep.
That's brain candy. And brain candy is totally fine as long as it's in moderation.
Yep.
And if you're in a period of life where you're trying to change your life and break through thresholds, guess what? Those things do have to, for the most part, take a back seat. And the brain candy time that you used to be spending needs to be replaced with the next 10 books you need to read.
Exactly.
Right? I was insatiable as a kid. First book I read was Think and Grow Rich. Right?
Napoleon.
So... And to be honest with you, it's kind of like exhausting to get through. It's a huge book.
It is.
But it's always stuck with me.
Is that Napoleon or is that Dale Carnegie?
I think it's Napoleon.
Napoleon, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dale Carnegie is the guy, I think, that is something about friends. How to win friends and influence people. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some cheeseball aspect to all that.
Yep.
But you have to be willing to drink some Kool-Aid right now. And that's just, that's the way it goes.
We can go all day with this. You know what, everybody? I'm hoping that you guys found some value in this today, and I know that I did, and it's always a reminder. But I'm hoping that you guys found some value in this, and please comment down below if you have any questions. Let me know. Would be happy to hear from you guys. Jason?
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, thank you again.
Nestor. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
honestly.
likewise.
Yeah.
Sweet. We're going to have to do this again because we got so much we can talk about.
Yeah. We're only just getting started.
Exactly. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.